Yeah, we are. Welcome back to the Beer Money America podcast. How you doing today, John?
I'm doing good. How are you doing today, Bill?
Doing great. I'm doing really well. I'm really happy about last episode because A, you agreed to do it again.
Always an achievement to get me to do anything.
Right. No, well, I mean, I wasn't sure how it went. And then number two, I did manage to hit the record button. So we actually captured it. So for those two reasons, I'm in good shape because I've recorded videos and podcasts and stuff for years. And there have been several occasions where I'm not even on the screen. I'm just behind the scenes pushing buttons. And my one job to push the record button, and I forgot. I did that a couple. I've done that a couple times, and it's like, oh well, that was a nice discussion that nobody will ever hear.
Well,
So
I have to admit, from my angle, because I've never done anything like this, and I don't have any extra equipment. I mean, I'm just doing this with a Surface Pro with a camera, just using the microphone that's in the machine itself.
yep,
So I mean, it's astoundingly easy, especially if you can hook up with somebody who's got the technical know-how to run the thing from the other end.
yeah. Well, like we talked about, I mean, I think that's the beauty of it. I mean, I've done several of these where people are just doing it on their phones. I mean, the phones have gotten so good,
Yeah, it's amazing.
and you don't it. Yeah, it'd be nice to have a fancy studio and all that, but nobody really cares that much. So
I suppose as
anymore.
long, I mean, all we're doing is basically having a conversation, between two friends. So if people
Yeah.
can, understand what we're saying, then I think we've got all we need.
Absolutely. So, what are you drinking today?
Let's see if I can throw it up there. So it's Two Towns cider, and it's blackberry flavor, and
Blackberry.
you can see that it's very purple.
Oh, it is blackberry. So, where do you find your cider? I mean,
You know,
in like beverage shops or whatever, liquor
yeah,
shops.
mostly in beverage shops. Like
Yeah.
Wine and More is a pretty good place to find it. They have quite a few different ones. I was down in Julian
Mhm.
the other day, and
Yeah.
there's like three or four cideries down there, so I was trying some there.
Have
So
you ever
local,
tried? Have you ever tried Twisted Horn here in Vista?
I have. It's good.
I just saw they launched two new ciders. I think it was yesterday or today.
Mhm. Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so
So
it
I'll have
is.
to go back again. I have to admit though, I do like their cider, but I've never really cared much for Mead, which is the other thing that they make. Have you ever
Right,
had
right,
Mead?
right. Yeah, that's different. Well, I'm doing Prohibition,
Oh, nice.
Proco
Another local.
IPA. Have you been to Prohibition?
I have.
Have-
It's a nice place, good
It
food, good
is.
beer. Yeah.
Exactly. And they were one of the originals. I think they were like number two or three breweries, the second or third brewery in Vista. So they've been
Yeah.
around for a long time. So it's really cool.
No, as I say,
So,
anyone who's listening to this, whoever comes down to Vista, stop by Prohibition. They're a good
yeah,
place.
no, great. It is. It's good food, just really cool atmosphere and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, hey, I mentioned to you about something wanted to talk to you about because I know you've got some background in real estate, the property management world, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Tell me about, have you read anything about the bed bugs thing going on in Paris?
Oh, in Paris? I know.
Yeah,
I can tell you a few things about bed bugs. First of all, buy a
that's what I was
foam
gonna,
mattress that doesn't have space for the bed bugs.
right?
But as far as what's actually going on in Paris, no, I haven't heard that.
Oh my gosh, it's like the whole town is just in an infestation of bed bugs, the subways, everything.
Oh, jeez.
And I was just reading about this, and there's a reason why I'm telling you this. Um, I was just reading about that, like, I don't know, 3, 4 weeks ago, about how it's just like going crazy.
Hmm.
And then my son came down last week from LA and was going to stay with us a few days and put him up in the guest room. And he got bit all
Oh,
over
geez.
his neck. And so we called, I won't name the company, somebody to come in and check. And they said, no, no, it's not bed bugs. it's carpet beetles or bugs. And
Okay.
so this, which is completely different in how you treat it, blah, blah, blah. And
Yeah.
then, so they set us up to get that treatment. And then the guy comes out to do the treatment. He says, "Oh no, you got bed bugs." And
Yeah.
we had moved all the stuff out of the bedroom because they said, get everything off the carpet for the carpet beetles. But then on bed bugs, you're not supposed to do that because you're just going to spread them.
Yeah.
And so it's like, that's why I moved all this stuff. My son ended up sleeping in the office on another bed. And so anyways, I thought, well, I'm going to ask John about bed bugs, how you've dealt with that in the past, if you have dealt with it in the past.
I have not had to deal with it in the past, but it's interesting that they would throw in carpet beetles. And again, I may be displaying my ignorance for the world to see here, but my understanding with beetles is they're usually more about doing damage to property and
Yeah,
not so much biting people. So
yeah.
if a person had been in a room in a bed and had gotten bitten by something, I don't know that I would have jumped to carpet beetles. So
No,
that's kind of interesting.
yeah, it was. Well, and as usual, we were bass backwards in all of this. And so then I started doing research after that happened. And then I kind of found out what you said about the carpet beetles and bugs. It's like, I mean, they can crawl up and kind of scratch your neck or something, but that's generally
Yeah, that's
not
not
what
common.
they do.
Yeah.
That's not what they generally do. And so, anyways, so I thought about you when we're going through this, like, oh, well, I need to get some other opinions on this stuff.
You know,
So,
the funny thing about bed bugs is too is like in the last, I don't know, let's say 10 years, I've been hearing a lot about bed bugs from various places. Again, I
yeah,
haven't experienced it. I haven't had a problem with it. But
no,
when I was growing up, I mean, I don't think I ever heard about bed bugs.
I
So
know.
there's something going on where one way or another, the bed bugs are just getting spread around, because they
Yeah,
just, you hear about it quite a bit now. So they
I
seem to
know.
be fairly prevalent. But I mean, again, 15 years ago, I couldn't even imagine running into bed bugs.
Yeah, no, this is the first time we ever ran into it. It was just really weird. So it was like I didn't even know where to go other than to YouTube. So that's
Yeah, well,
where,
that's the way it's done now, for sure.
anyways. Well, enough of that silliness. So what's been intriguing you this week in the world of politics and local community activism and all that good
Yeah.
stuff?
Well, what's been intriguing me a little bit is, I think it's kind of been intriguing everyone, but also the way that it's going to impact our local community, and that's what's going on in Israel right now. I mean, obviously, what's
Mm,
going on in Israel is horrendous. But as residents of, North County and San Diego, we're Pendleton, Miramar, we're, the San Diego, shipping yards and everything down there. So, every time something comes up like this, and you got the national political scene, Biden and his ilk, and especially like someone like Lindsey Graham, who are rattling sabers and saying we need to go to war with Iran. I mean, they could be shipping out a whole bunch of our community, the people that are right in
oh
this
yeah.
area that we see every day, and sending them off to Iraq, which, you know, again, we say that we talk about, all politics being local, but, sometimes the national and international stuff hits right here really hard.
Well, it is local for us. I mean,
Yeah.
because like all the reasons you said. And so when that happens, it is it. And I was lucky. I didn't go into the military. I didn't. I feel badly about it in many ways. My dad was a Marine and was
Mm.
on Iwo Jima and all that kind of stuff. But I do have empathy for the families in
Oh,
particular
for
when that
sure.
stuff happens. And the whole North County and San Diego as a whole just gets it really has a big impact, much like they have in other, port cities and stuff.
Yeah.
And well, so that's why it is a local issue in my mind.
Yeah.
And
Very much.
from your leanings, but how do you feel about that? Because in terms of really supporting all the things that are going on in other countries, I mean, between Ukraine,
Yeah.
Israel. I mean, there's always this discussion about can we really be the police for the world, right?
Yeah.
And uh, and I know there's so many people that are almost staunchly opposed to supporting the things that are going on in Israel as far as supporting militarily, or Ukraine. And yet at the same time, there's some pretty awful people that have done some pretty awful things, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of an interesting time to talk about, foreign policy because, we are about to be in two wars. Because, I mean, one way or the other, America is going to send some kind of assistance to Israel. I don't know
Right.
exactly what it's going to look like, but it's going to be something. And, it's funny, there's been so many wars, in my lifetime. I almost feel like maybe, we should go back and go, you know, even further back. But just sort of on like first blush, I'm not super supportive of what's going on in the Ukraine because I feel like there are probably avenues to have some kind of accord, and I don't get the sense that we're really pursuing that. We're just pumping money and material into the Ukrainian military,
Right.
and if we're not really going to be looking for solutions, and I mean, think about it. I mean, that's really Europe. I mean, what are our European partners doing? What do they want to do? And all these other things. So I'm a little bit I'm fairly skeptical about what's going on in the Ukraine. I'm glad, obviously, we haven't sent troops over there, and I don't think
Right.
we ever should. But I would the way it started and what's going on and what the potential resolution of it. I think we should be trying to end just get it over with as quickly as possible. Finding some way to negotiate a solution. On the other hand, what happened in Israel was so horrendous,
Oh my gosh.
and the kind of things that have been going on for so long. I think I've been sort of thinking for quite a number of years because I mean you think about all the conflicts that we've been in that region of the world, that at some point it's just got to come to a head, and we got to start cutting down the people that running and funding the terrorists because I mean, and this is me, and everyone has always said
Yeah.
I'm completely crazy about some of this stuff, but it's like the one thing I don't want to see is just like endless bombings of Iran and killing like
Right.
thousands of civilians for no reason. I think we're at a point in this world where you have to cut the head off the snake. You've got to go after, the leadership.
Right.
Don't kill innocent civilians who are just trying to survive and are in a bad
Right.
position anyway. Go after the leadership. And I guess at this point that's kind of what the only thing I could hope for. You
Right.
know, because otherwise you're just killing people.
Well, that's
You
what's
know,
happening. That's going to start happening in Gaza now, right?
yeah,
So, I mean, so many of those people are not involved in Hamas, but they're going to be, victimized as a result of it. But you look at Israel's part of it, it's like, well, we got to find these guys somehow, and unfortunately,
right.
it's their strategy to embed themselves with the general population, and it's a very tough, tough problem.
Yeah, but and as I say, just sort of reflecting on it again on all the wars we've seen over all these years, it's it's easy to make yourself out to be a martyr if you're
Mhm.
just dropping bombs on a city because there's going to be so many casualties. Eventually a hospital gets blown up, eventually a school gets blown up, and innocent people who really shouldn't have been involved in the thing anyway,
Yep.
end up dying. So I think that fighting a war in a moral way is, more or less impossible, you know.
Right.
But if you're going to attempt to do something like that, if you want to be on the high ground and say you're trying to fight a war to end wars, then what you really need to do is you need to say, okay, the leadership that organized, funded, prepared, led these attacks, go after them very, very specifically. Find where they go, find where their assets are, find where their bunkers are buried, and strike that and leave everybody else out of it as much as you can. And even when things do go wrong and
Oh
unfortunately
yeah.
people die, at least you can say, look, we definitely weren't targeting them.
Right.
We have to go after the leadership because of what they did, but we are
Right.
not targeting civilian areas.
Right.
And that's about all. I guess that's about all you can hope for.
Yeah. Well, the crazy part about attempting that, and I don't totally disagree with that, is international law is you're not. supposed to try and assassinate anybody, right? Which is basically what you're suggesting in a way.
Right. No,
And
it's not basically what it's suggesting. It is what I'm suggesting.
so,
And that's the thing, and I understand that.
yeah,
And I get it. And the leaders of countries pass those laws to protect themselves so that they can fight wars and not suffer the consequences.
right.
Well,
Oh,
from my point of view, I'm done with that. You
I know.
started this, you
It's
started a
not working.
war, you fund terrorism, yeah,
Yeah.
we're coming after you.
Yeah. Well, whatever what we're doing now is certainly not working.
Oh
I
no.
mean, yeah, they're comparing the whole Israeli thing to, our 9/11, much worse than our 9/11.
Yeah,
Uh,
per
it,
capita, much
per
worse. Yeah.
capita, way worse than our 9/11. And, you know, but what's changed? Nothing's changed since 9/11, really. I
Yeah.
mean, these groups are still out there. And that's where I know the whole
Yes, you're
moral
on board.
discussion goes on about, because at the end of the day, you look at almost all these wars that have happened, particularly in our lifetimes,
Oh
and
yeah.
it's involved people being oppressed, whether that's, somebody in Iran or Afghanistan or, the Palestinians right now. And, so the thoughts of trying to pull people out of that kind of oppression through other means, whether it's diplomatic or economic or whatever, seems like the logical thing to do. But there's always these other obstacles in the way of just
Yeah.
even if you're trying to do the right thing. How many places have we gone in and tried to help rebuild a country?
Yeah.
And then, I mean, we've had some success. We rebuilt Germany, we rebuilt Japan, but the toll that those two countries took,
Oh, I know.
I mean,
Brutal.
talk about obliterating a place. I mean, particularly Japan.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, we're really the only country that's ever used weapons of mass destruction,
Yeah. No
right?
question. Yeah. Well, the
And
only ones to ever use a nuclear weapon in
yeah,
hostility. So
yeah,
yeah, no question about that. But it's interesting, because you mentioned the idea of, all the places that we've been into, and I was kind of thinking about that the other day. And this is just off the top of my head, but I mean, you go through all the recent presidents. You've got, just start from the top. So Biden, we've got Ukraine and now Middle East, Israel.
yeah,
Trump didn't get us into too many wars, so I mean, there's something for him.
right.
Biden got the huge escalation in Syria and, with ISIS and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and then before him, Bush,
Bush,
obviously, good Lord, I mean,
Iraq and
Iraq,
Afghanistan.
Afghanistan,
Yeah.
just ghastly, ghastly errors too, especially, I kind of, going back to, like, as they say, the history of wars, obviously after 9/11, there needed to be a response in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
The training facilities that were in
Right.
Afghanistan clearly had to go. But the invasion of Iraq,
Ridiculous.
yeah, and here's the thing that's always bothered me about it, and I don't think gets talked about enough. One of the great blunders is to open up a second front in a war, right? So if that's the war on terror, and we were engaged in a front in Afghanistan on the war on terror, why in God's name would you invade Iraq in the midst of
Right.
trying to deal with Afghanistan? I mean, honestly, I
Yep.
think if he had tried to wrap up in some sensible way the mission in Afghanistan before going to Iraq, there could have been maybe a better result in Afghanistan and almost certainly a better result in Iraq. Even if you wanted to go into Iraq at all, which I also think is dubious, of course. But
Right.
so Bush was, I mean, forget it. I mean, terrible. But then you go back to Clinton. He had Kosovo, and before
Yeah.
Clinton, you're going to go Bush the Elder. So Iraq
Yeah.
won. Reagan
Right.
had
Yeah.
Grenada, and then I guess Gerald Ford didn't have enough time to get us into a war.
Right. And Jimmy Carter did either, so, but,
Yeah.
um,
Well, Carter had the Shah of Iran stuff, which,
well, yeah, the
I mean, I
hostages
guess,
and then,
yeah. So, I
and
mean, I
so,
guess technically,
yeah.
no, please go ahead.
So no, I know and you look at all those cases, and I guess you could count Vietnam in a roundabout way as a success in a long term. Vietnam
Yeah.
has stabilized, but oh my gosh, the toll for that was ridiculous.
And the
So, I
aftermath
mean,
of how we left in the Khmer Rouge and the
you're
massacres
right.
in Cambodia. I mean,
It's ridiculous. Oh my God.
just
I don't
awful.
know. So I know it's one of those complicated things that I guess everybody's trying to figure out. But this is where I do have some conspiracy theory tendency. I
I
try to
love
avoid
conspiracy theories, so I'm
those.
always up for that.
I try to avoid those because I don't think, generally speaking, people in power are that smart to do some of the things people suggest.
Yeah,
But I do think you follow the money, and like Eisenhower said, the military industrial complex is going to be a thing that we're going to really have to deal with after World War II.
yeah,
And I think there is something to be said for that. It's like, all these, representatives and Congress and senators will push for all kinds of military investments where the military doesn't even want to be investing
yeah,
in, new technologies and stuff. We don't need this. We don't want this. Well, this company in my state, you know, they're really good at this. It's like, well, great, but we don't need it. But then they get it funded, and there you go.
yeah,
So that's, and I always come back to the money thing, as you and I have talked in the past. It's like, you just follow the money. I don't care if it's politics, particularly politics, which the military, and whether they say they're not involved in politics or not, they're very much involved in politics. They have to
for
be.
sure.
Um, and it comes down to money. It's just like, God, the money we spend, and we fight over, kind of the crumbs, when other than things like healthcare and Social Security and Medicare kind of thing, all the other stuff, it's like breadcrumbs compared to, what we spend on whatever EPA or,
Yeah,
FDA, or these are breadcrumbs in comparison to the military. It's just like,
yeah. Well, that's a
I'm not saying
that
you should,
we should have that
I,
discussion on one of these podcasts about
yeah.
military spending, because I think it's actually kind of an interesting issue. But I would say the one thing that you left out of the spending chart, and I think is really critical, and this is sort of changing topics, but I believe we're now paying more money on the interest for the national debt than we are
Oh
for the
yeah.
military. So I
No,
mean,
you're right.
think about that. That is a
Huge.
disaster.
No, that was a big oops. Yeah, no, I totally agree with you on that.
Yeah.
And again, that to me is where a third party could play a huge role in that,
Mhm.
because I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. That's just that should not be a political question. It's like, this has to get changed, and there's going to be give and takes on all sides, no doubt. And whether that means cutting expenses, maybe raising taxes a little bit, whatever it is, but it's just out of control.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too is that, I wanted to bring in the kind of the third party idea too is, one of the reasons I was sort of thinking about all the wars we'd been in and all the presidents that sort of got us into wars or escalating wars or just any kind of like drama, worldwide. This is where the whole uniparty thing starts to come in, because the Republicans and the Democrats both seem to be pretty happy about getting into wars pretty consistently.
Absolutely.
And the thing is, if you had another voice that could be a voice for at least skepticism about going to war with things, kind of like, I mean, not to toot my own horn too much, but like I was saying at the beginning, it's like I'm very skeptical about what we're doing in Ukraine, while at the same time, I kind of understand that we're going to need
Mhm.
to probably have
Yeah.
some intervention in Israel. So it's like I'm not a peacenik or an isolationist, so I see where some of these conflicts, may be necessary or we may get drug into them. But there should always be at least a group of people saying, "Hey, wait, step back. Should we really be doing this? Is this really the right way to go? Are we going to get a good outcome? Is
And
there
for all
a
for all
possible
the
good
reasons,
outcome?"
right?
Yeah,
For all the reasons, not. I mean, there's the moral reasons, there's the financial reasons,
exactly.
all that has, and usually they're arguments that go on separately. It's like there's always this moral thing. We should be doing this to help somebody.
Yeah,
And then separately, there's, well, we're spending way too much money, or we're not spending enough money. And it's
yeah,
like, hey, these have to be join together because it's a balance,
Yeah.
in my mind.
But
And at the end of the day, going back to the debt and deficit issues that we
Mhm.
constantly have, that's a big one. It's
Oh
like
yeah.
that, when you add up where a lot of that money's going, it's in these kind of efforts.
But I
And
mean, we're
like you said,
pumping billions
Republicans
into
and
this, right?
Democrats both are guilty
Yeah.
on big
Yeah.
time.
Yep. Yeah, as I say, that's always, and I have to say, that's always been one of my really big problems with the Republican Party. The Republicans sometimes talk a good game about, fiscal responsibility,
Right.
but they
No,
don't, I mean, do they ever deliver on that? I mean,
no,
I don't really think so.
no.
So it's like, it's fine to have a party that talks about, trying to be responsible or trying to help some of the nation's problems by getting rid of some of the debt. But when they never actually come through with it, you got to think to yourself, we have to have some people that are more serious about this because, we're getting, it's getting to be nasty. Because, I mean, you think about all the things that all this debt, contributes to. I mean, first of all, it, if we say that Social Security is going to go bankrupt in 10 years or there's going to
Right.
be rate cuts in 10 years or something like that.
Right.
Well, if we're paying more money in debt
Right.
payment, then that we're going to need for Social Security. Well, what are we thinking? Why do we do this to ourselves? We just
It,
shot ourselves in the foot. We if we hadn't gotten so far into debt, we could have used that money to do something about Social Security. But now it's gone, and we're obligated to pay it. So it's crazy.
no, it is. I mean, and on all levels, the debt situation i- is a big problem. It's a security issue,
Oh yeah,
you know, in many ways. Obviously, it's a financial and economic issue.
yep,
I mean, every level, it is an issue, and why that's not a top priority. And coming from more the left-leaning side, that's never been really a priority. At least all I can say about the Democrats, at least they were honest about. They've been honest about. It's like, hey,
yeah,
yeah, we're not too worried about how it gets paid. We just want to do all these things. Where
yeah.
the Republicans kind of pretended like, well, no, we got to pay for all this.
They
But
never
the
did
reality
though.
is neither one of them did it. And on the flip side, on the Democrat side, it's like funding some of the things that have been funded is like, okay, in the big scheme of things, we got to prioritize this stuff. We can't do everything. And,
Yeah. Well,
it,
one of the other things that I would mention about debt and inflation is that a lot of the time when people talk about poverty or people that can't afford healthcare or they have to choose between rent and food and all these different types of things, a lot of time it boils down to, well, we need to do something about wages. Wages are too low. But what doesn't get talked about nearly enough is cost of living. And one of
right,
the things that goes up when you have massive amounts of debt, massive amounts of spending, massive amounts of taxes, regulations, et cetera, is you're constantly pushing up the cost of living. So
yep,
California is probably the richest state in the United States,
yeah, oh, it
but
is,
it also has the highest rate of poverty. And the reason for that is that the cost of living in California is outrageously high.
yep,
So when you hear one of the political parties complaining about how we need to do something about the affordability of medical insurance, well, one thing you could do to address that, while simultaneously addressing things like the writers' strike and the truckers' strike, and everybody who's striking to get, because they say they don't make enough money to make a living, and
right,
to do something about Social Security and all these other things, lower cost of living.
right,
If you could get lower cost of living, then suddenly all of those things get better, plus a million other things. But as long as we're obsessed with having massively huge amounts of debt so that we can fund massively huge spending on whatever, then you're shooting yourself in the foot, right? Because you
right,
keep making things more expensive. So you pay more money to people so that they can afford health insurance, but then you make the cost of healthcare higher, and now the insurance you just bought for them isn't any good anyway.
right.
So you gotta figure out how to start to get cost of living down and get our labor markets to be more competitive again. Because right now it's just going in a really bad direction.
Yeah. Well, you must have been happy. I don't know if you saw this in the news. It was the last day or two where Newsom, Governor Newsom here in California, has signed. I'm sure you love him. Uh,
Oh yeah.
but he has signed legislation that basically relaxes all the permitting and environmental constraints around low income housing. So they
Hmm.
can, so developers and, even like churches and stuff can develop low income housing, and they're kind of, easing all the crap and permits and all that kind of stuff. That just happened this past week. So to your
Well,
point, that
yeah,
all adds into that whole cost of living thing. It's like
correct.
you can't ignore the environmental impact things on, but at the same time, it's gotten so difficult to actually do the simplest things when it comes
Exactly.
to development that I was encouraged a little bit that here he is, a Democrat saying, hey, we need to just chill out on some of this stuff so we can get the housing situation starting to turn around.
So, first of all, he's doing that because he's going to run for president and he
Oh
doesn't
no,
want
I know why he's doing it.
to.
Oh, totally. It's completely transparent whether he wants to say it or not.
But the other part of it is though that it always gets me when people do things like, "We'll relax some regulations for this group of people." Why not just relax them for everybody? I mean, if you can
Everybody, yeah.
relax them, they can't be that
Yep.
critical.
It's fair enough.
So just let them go. Because I think you were mentioning the other day when we were talking about the fact that Biden is in a pinch where he's going to have to build a portion of the wall because of some kind of funding
Right.
tied up in Congress, and
Yeah,
he's
yeah,
relaxing all kinds of environmental regulations to allow that to be built. It's
yeah,
like, how, wait a minute. So
yeah.
just on a whim, when it suits you, the environment suddenly doesn't matter anymore. I mean, either you need these regulations because we're going to die from global warming, or you don't really need them that much because you can just relax them. So it
It's a good
can't really
litmus
be both.
test, right? It's a good litmus test as to what's really important when push comes to
Yeah.
shove. It's like, okay, so is it worse to have people living out on the streets where they can't afford a place to live?
Hmm.
Or is it worse that we're doing something to the environment? Both can be true, but you still, at the end of the day, you got to figure out which one's more important in the near term.
Yeah.
It's probably, I always find it fascinating because I've dealt with homeless issues of different um, things that I've been involved in over the years. And when the environmental stuff comes up, I always find it fascinating that people are adamant that we can't let go of the environmental things. Yet, if you will, are and look around, some of the homeless encampments and
Yep.
things that are going on there, it's like these are environmental disasters already.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
it's like I hear you. I mean, we don't want what was it, the East River or whatever, or the river in Ohio that started on fire because there's so much pollution.
Yeah.
We don't
Cuyahoga.
want that. We get it, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, there's something between that and what we have now where we need to just get a little closer to being sort of reasonable. And again, this is where from a local perspective,
Exactly.
people can have so much more impact. There was even one down in southeast San Diego, the biofuels. There's a biofuels company down there,
Hmm.
and again, you can agree or disagree with how it all happened, but apparently it was, it's in a relatively poor area, but it's, they take basically the grease from kitchens and turn it into biofuel, but it smells
Yeah.
awful apparently.
Oh yeah.
And so the communities banded together and they forced them that, hey, you got to put this stuff into pipelines, get it away from us. So and it was a case where the community, that's where it's so important to get involved in the community aspects because biofuels are probably a good thing.
Oh, yeah. Anything you can recycle, that's going to be a good thing.
Anything you can recycle and get that out and reuse it, and so that's a good thing. But again, in that case, it's more like, okay, let's balance it with people and their living standards, right, in that area. So they're all complicated things, but there's usually some place you can kind of find a little turn off and, hey, let's go
Yeah.
this way.
The thing is, I think that also goes back to, creating a new party, especially in a place like California, which
Oh my
honestly
God.
is a one party state.
Yeah.
If you had an interjection of different ideas about how something could be done, instead of just this unaccountable, essentially governance that just has one mindset and one way of thinking, then maybe you could get better solution to things. I mean, innovation is the thing. If you can be
Right.
innovative and come up with new things and better ideas, but you can't do that unless you have diversity of opinion. If you don't have people producing ideas, if you don't have discussions about things, if people aren't willing to listen to different opinions, well, I mean, you're never gonna get anywhere. Innovation is just gonna go away.
Right. Yeah. And rarely, as we all, particularly for those of us who are in business, is the right answer is the one that you come up with. It's usually it's a question of, okay, I'm going to work with so and so, and we're going to kind of brainstorm on this thing, and
Yeah.
usually the answer is somewhere beyond what you initially thought, right?
Yeah.
And it's so true.
I think if you want to be successful in business, you've got to listen to people because, my experience running my business is that I almost never have all the right answers to everything. But almost always there is somebody out there that does. And so if I'm willing to look around for the person who might have the right answer and listen to people who have ideas about what the solution could be, that gives me the opportunity to tap all the knowledge that's out there. And then I can make good decisions because, you know, as someone who's running a company, my job is basically to take in all the information that I can and then make the final decision on something.
Sure.
I can't possibly know everything. I can't possibly do everything. I just have to be willing to listen to what's going on, the various professionals in various aspects of, the business, and then, make a decision based on what those experts are telling me. So, and it should be the same way with politics. There needs to be enough people with enough ideas saying enough things that somewhere, in there, there's an actual good decision being made as opposed to the random fluff that we have now.
Well, and again, that's where the third party, maybe four parties, five parties come into play, right?
Exactly.
Because right now there's no incentive for the two parties to really come to agreement on anything because it just helps fuel their machines, right?
Yeah. And,
And
and
that's why
I
we
was gonna
need.
say, I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say that's to your point, and I totally agree. That's the reason having that other voice for all the people who don't feel like they have a home, in either
Yeah.
party. And there's more of us, more independents, at least in
Yep.
California, than there are Republicans, right? Democrats are still leading, but not by that much.
Yeah.
And so it's like, man, getting that independent-minded think process going and having conversations like we're trying to have here is the key. You got to get it. And the way it starts is having a conversation and taking it from there.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like you were saying about having two new parties, three, four, or five. I have to think that the more ideas that come forward, the better chance you are of having, a solution that could actually work. Like, I, I- I'm kind of, I don't know how to put this exactly, but I'm a fan of meta intelligence. I've seen things over the years where people have talked about the idea that, you know, a thousand people of average intelligence are more capable of coming up with more solutions for more things than, one or two geniuses. Because the one or two geniuses might come up with something, but the thousands of people that can all contribute to, the potential for different ideas, that's really where solutions come from. And there's an interesting example that I heard about many years ago. And I wish I had, like a link that I could click on to send people to this. But my understanding was that there was a group of scientists that were having a difficulty trying to figure out the structure of a protein, and they just
Mhm.
unleashed it on the internet. And they said, anyone who can figure this out, go for it. And thousands, if not millions, of people looked at it, and somewhere along the line, people working sort of collectively through, the internet figured out the structure of the protein. And it's like
Right,
they weren't necessarily all, biochemists.
right,
They just there's just so many people with so many ideas about what it could possibly be. Eventually, somebody hits on something. But
exactly.
yeah, but the way we do things now is we close everything off to this like single point where all the decisions come from, and it's a really bad way to do things.
No, absolutely. And today, with the technology that we have, it's so easy to bring people together and have that kind of, forum, right? To
Yeah,
get people from all parts of the world, literally, and doing that if if the goal's right. I mean, I guess the argument and the flip side to that is at the end of the day, you still need somebody to make a decision, right? So
Yeah.
now the protein thing, that's kind of science a little bit. It's sort of black and white. It's like, bingo, we finally hit the right sweet spot, right, for whatever the protein thing was or whatever. But in some of these more social issues, I guess you'd say, um, there's not necessarily a sweet spot because somebody's probably not going to get exactly what they want. In
Right.
fact, nobody will get what they want exactly. And so then you kind of start getting down to okay, what's the lowest common denominator that we'll all kind of get along with, which
Yeah.
is not necessarily the best solution. And governments, I know a lot of local governments anyways, have kind of gotten away from we're going to bid something out and we're going to go with the lowest cost provider, right?
Yeah.
That used to be the mentality. Now it's most are doing not necessarily the lowest cost provider, but who comes back with the most effective solution, assuming it's within the range of what a budget is. And it's not, hey, I can do this for 10 cents cheaper than the next guy because it might be crap.
Yeah.
So I mean
Well,
that it goes to the same idea that you're talking about. It's getting those ideas and coalescing them into something that makes more sense.
yeah, no, and as I say, and I think that's where new parties and more parties, can help that, because again, it's all about interjecting ideas into the debate. But since you were bringing up contractors, I have to tell you my rule of contractors. So everyone always tells you to get three bids. Before you do any project, you got to get three bids. And I've been doing that for years and years and years. And I've discovered over the time that when you get three bids, you always get the same three things. One person seems pretty reasonable.
Right?
The second person never shows up.
Right?
And the third person attempts to sell you something you don't want.
Right.
So in the long run, for me, it never turns out to be the lowest bid.
Uh,
It's just whoever the one person is that shows up that seems to make some kind of sense. That's who I end up going with.
no, I have had the same revelation, and I mean, it is a little different. I get it. It's a little different when you were working in a private company like we are,
Yeah.
where you can kind of make those judgments. Whereas if you're dealing with public money, in fact, I just had this discussion with somebody last night that's in the public world about another issue, and they don't have quite that freedom to say,
Yeah.
well, we know where this is going to end up, but we have to go through the charade, basically, of doing this because for us in business, I don't know how it is with you, but I kind of know who my go-to people are.
Yeah, for sure.
And maybe if there's something that's a little different or something, I'll go and seek out other bids or whatever. But generally speaking, I know who the people are who are trustworthy, they may not be the cheapest, but they're going to give me a fair deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, once you get that, it's so much more efficient
Yeah.
for
Well, I was going
everybody.
to say that, when I deal with people, once I've got somebody who does the job that I need them to do and they do it well, then I'm just going to go to them
Why
because
bother?
yeah,
You know?
I'm not after I got somebody that can do it, that they do it. That's it.
Yep. 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 Yep.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, we're running a little bit long. So much for our 30-minute goal.
What are you going to do?
But this was really good. This was an important discussion, particularly I mean, we try and keep things a little bit on the lighter side, but at the same time, there's some topics that when you're talking about people living and dying every day, which in my mind,
Yeah.
I just think what happened over there in Israel and the brutality,
Yeah.
um, and it goes on every day, and again, not to diminish in any way, shape, or form what's happened in Israel, but that kind of brutality happens in other parts of the world almost
Oh
every
yeah.
day, particularly through parts of Africa. And I mean, some of the brutality that goes on there that doesn't get nearly the attention. Um, it's one of those tough subjects,
Yeah.
but we can't be the police for the world, right?
Yeah. Well, no, I agree. I'm not up for being the police for the world, but I did just because there is such a concentration of military, and there's so many people in here that are going to be so affected if
Yes,
we end up getting involved in Iran. I felt like, even though again, definitely not the light side of the news, but had to say something, hope for the best, wish our troops the best, and anyone
absolutely.
who has to end up getting sent overseas or into some kind of war, you know, God bless them. I just hope that they come back intact and well. And,
Yeah,
I mean, but I just felt like that something had to be said when you live basically on top of Camp Pendleton.
absolutely. No, I appreciate you did that. And yeah, and not for now, but that will be another topic somewhere down the way because I'm certainly not a military expert in any stretch of the imagination. But
Yeah.
what does intrigue me over time is how sophisticated we've
Yeah.
gotten in terms of killing people. And you know what I mean? And it's one of those again, it's one of those it's a good thing in a way, but it's a really weird thing in a way that you look at some of these recent, I mean, Afghanistan in particular, where we were in there for what, 20 plus years?
Yeah.
And we lost, relatively speaking, we lost very few people in the military compared
Yeah.
to when you compare it to Vietnam or World War II. And that's just like a crazy dynamic.
Yeah.
And
But again, going back to the sophistication of things and the technology in our hands and, the nature of these kind of conflicts that we seem to be involved in, that's why I'm saying it's time to stop forgiving the leaders of these countries and letting them off the
right.
hook.
Yep.
It's time to go after them.
Yep. All right, man. All right. Well, we'll catch you and next week. And just so for those who are listening, we're trying to do this on a Thursday afternoon, drinking early, starting about 1 o'clock.
Yeah, but
But yeah, but then we're going to be posting these things on Sunday, so gives us time to do a little bit of editing and things like that. But that's the plan. So appreciate everybody kind of chiming in, and I hope over time. And I know you repeat this, and I agree with it. I hope we just start conversations.
yeah,
That's not just between you and me, but just everywhere. Just
yeah.
particularly with people that you don't necessarily would normally line politically with, um, because at the end of the day, most of us are much closer to the center than we realize.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, there's a huge group of us just sort of disaffected, not really Democrat, not really Republican, people
Yep.
looking for something who are just, I think, reasonable people. And again, and I do think that this podcast really, in a lot of respects, is just about having conversations, because I'm not trying to put myself up as some kind of great, expert on global
Oh, me
affairs or
neither.
politics or anything else. But I think that it's discussions in lay terms by lay people that affect a lot of people's decisions. And again, and I because I am such an advocate for third parties, and that just means
Me
discussion.
too.
That means the interjection of ideas into politics. And if you can have a conversation, you can have ideas. Just be willing to listen,
Yep.
be willing to talk.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there's so many topics in that area that we need to
Mhm.
get into. I I won't even get into them because we're going to go off on another tangent. But there's some really interesting things that are happening in the third party world that I definitely want to get your take on
For sure.
here real soon.